Hey guys, it's John from Haive Music, and I wanted to continue on with our tutorials here. And today I wanted to touch on the topic of sidechain compression in Ableton. Not so much how to sidechain compress, but more so I wanted to draw a direct comparison between the older Ableton 8 compressor and the more modern Ableton 9 compressor, and why you might want to use the Ableton 8 compressor for sidechaining over the Ableton 9 compressor. For those of you who are unaware, when Ableton released Ableton 9, they actually revamped their compressor and they redid the models as well as the algorithms of how this functions. So, well, it looks very similar. It actually functions quite differently, and you can tell the difference between the 8 and the 9 compressors here by the peak, RMS, expand, and you have a lin and a log here, as opposed to the fast forward 1, fast forward 2, feed backward model here. And of course you have peak RMS and opto settings, as well as an upgrade option which would bring your Ableton 8 compressor up to the new Ableton 9 compressor. So it's pretty easy to tell them apart, even though they do look and function quite similarly. But how they actually react to your music and what they do to the incoming signals is quite different here, and I'll kind of show you why. But before we get to that, if you don't have Ableton 8 compressor, and by that, unless you specifically already loaded this by hand, you're probably not going to have it in Ableton 9 or Ableton 10, because unfortunately they didn't keep it as an older preset. It probably would have been pretty cool of them to do that, but unfortunately they didn't. So basically what I've done, and what you can do too, is if you go online and you type in Ableton 8 compressor preset, you'll probably come across some people who have this 8compressor.adv, and what I've done is basically loaded that in once I got it on them, and you can save this as the default preset, so that way when you go to drag or double click, you can just basically boom, you're popped into the Ableton 8 compressor. You don't have to screw around with going in here and dropping down and dragging up a specific preset, or swapping out your preset either. So it's just a little bit quicker, nicer way of doing it, and it's what I use for pretty much everything as far as compression goes. Specifically, also always sidechaining compression, but usually just as my go-to compressor to begin with. So if you haven't set that up right, go ahead, grab yourself it, and you should be good to go. I'm not really sure of the legalities behind linking or uploading the Ableton 8 compressor to my own website, so for the sake of that, I'm probably just gonna defer you to Googling around to find it. But it's not too hard to find. If you have difficulties, let me know. Leave a comment or hit me up on email or something, and we'll try to find you a link and try to find somebody who's hosting it for you. So anyways, back to the video here. Like I said, the Ableton 9 compressor is typically frowned upon for sidechaining for two reasons. Number one is it can cause some popping and clicking pretty easily, and it also is pretty easy to introduce some distortion into your signal here. So for the sake of the video, I've gone through and I've kind of created a little bass heavy track just to kind of illustrate what happens if you're not sidechaining. If you're unfamiliar with what sidechaining is, you should probably check out some other videos first and actually learn the basics of it. But essentially what it does is it's basically a method to create some space in your mix here. I mean, your low end frequencies are going to get muddied up here pretty easily and pretty quickly when you overlap, say, your bass with a kick, as we have here. So one way around that is to basically sidechain your sub bass to your kick, and basically what that does, it drops the volume and attenuates the volume of your kick, or excuse me, of your bass every time the kick happens. So it basically allows your kick to punch through the mix a little bit more. You don't get any weird phasing issues, and you just all around get a cleaner mix. So without sidechaining, you, like I said, you're going to get some weird phasing issues, which we'll hear now. And what we want to do here is basically try to clean that up and let our kick punch through the mix a little bit more. So we're first going to use the Ableton 9 compressor here, and like I said, you can introduce a lot of weird distortion very easily with this. So we're going to turn off our hats, our snare, and our funky kicks here. So we just have our kick and our bass, and we'll listen for that distortion. Just by cranking this down, we can kind of force it. And you can just hear what it's doing to our signal. It's just crunching it down, creating all that nasty distortion, which if we raise the release, it starts to go away. But as you've also heard, not only has that caused the distortion to go away, I mean, it's pretty uncommon that you're going to have the release down at 1 millisecond, but regardless of that, it's also introduced a lot of clicking and popping into, you know, the signal here. Every time that we drop, you know, the compressor hits or it drops the volume. If we listen to it again, we can hear that popping and clicking, and we'll bring our attack up until it starts to go away. And that's all fine and great. It's sounding pretty good. Sounded definitely a lot better than without it. So we definitely cleaned the mix up a lot, but unfortunately what we've also added is about 2 milliseconds worth of attack on the compressor. And for whatever reason, the Ableton 9 compressor just does not simply react as quick as the Ableton 8 compressor did. Don't really know why it is. It obviously has something to do with the algorithms that they changed. But, you know, for a lot of people, this might not be a bad thing. But for a lot of people who are expecting or requiring a faster attack time on their compressor, that 2 milliseconds could mean a great deal when it comes to their end mixes. So what we want to do, and I'll show you here with the Ableton 8 compressor, we'll start off again by very similar settings. We'll just show you the distortion again with the Ableton 9 as opposed to the Ableton 8, which will not have that distortion. So let's take a listen here again to the 9. And it's just a night and day difference between the two. It just does not seem to have that distortion, nor the clicking and the popping. I mean, we can bring this up to more respectable, and maybe not respectable, but more of a, I guess, a level of what you might be using this to commonly release at with a kick, I guess. And we still won't get that popping and clicking that we do with the Ableton 9 compressor. And so just that alone for me and many other people, it just kind of, you know, steers us away from ever using the Ableton 9 compressor for sidechaining. And, you know, there's a million different ways to sidechain out there. You know, if you're using 4 on the floor type music, or maybe not using it, but you're making 4 on the floor type beats, you know, you might be able to get away with an LFO tool or, you know, an LFO shaper, maybe even using multi-band compression to kind of just chop out the low end here when your kick hits every 4 beats, or I should say every beat. But for more intricate drum patterns that switch up, it's not always an option. And of course, you could always use, say, LFO tool or something like that and use an external kick to trigger those as well. But again, just for using what Ableton has, the Ableton 8 compressor is a pretty capable little guy there, and it definitely cleans up the mix quite a bit. So, you know, for me and a lot of other people, that's why we prefer the Ableton 8 compressor, specifically when we're doing sidechain compression. So, like I said, if you don't have the Ableton 8 compressor, go out there, take a peek, see what you can find, and yeah, load it into your Ableton sessions, give it a shot, and I've no doubt that it's going to clean up your mixes here a lot more than you know, the Ableton 9 compressor will. And we can even probably toss this in our funky little kicks and probably drop our threshold our ratio a little bit, and threshold as well. And probably clean this up a little bit more too. So yeah, there you go, guys. Thanks for watching, and yeah, good luck.